Welcome to Savvy Business, Life Unscripted with your host, Christina Rivera, where our guests share their wisdom and valuable business tips, empowering our audience to expand their personal potential.
Hi, Rachel Malone. Welcome to Savvy Broadcasting, Life Unscripted. I'm so grateful to have you here this evening for our Life After COVID segment, and this is really awesome. We've never talked about this subject, and that is kind of going around the Second Amendment, understanding what does that mean to right to bear arms. You are the Texas Director of Gun Owners of America, GOA. A lot of our listening audience might not know much about guns or have an understanding about guns. Some do, but share with the audience before we go deeper into how you got involved into this issue. What is your backstory in firearms?
Right. So I didn't have a background in firearms at all. I grew up in Texas, and everybody thinks of Texas, especially if you're not in Texas, everybody has a gun. It's this great gun rights haven. I don't think it actually lives up to that reputation. But even as a lifelong Texan, we didn't have guns. We didn't discuss guns. It wasn't an issue that was brought up in my household. I was a musician. So I was trained as a classical musician. I had my own business. I was freelancing, enjoying it, teaching kids. It was violin and piano. It was like my life was classical music and nothing related to guns. But the topic came up when I was in my early 20s. And my brother actually decided that he was going to get his license to carry, which you had to do, and which you still have to do in Texas in order to carry your handgun legally. Mm-hmm. And I found out about this, and I was terrified for him. All I knew is I cared about my brother, and he was talking about carrying something that I thought would just, blow up at any time. And I cared about his life. I didn't want him carrying that. But I knew he was pretty convinced that he was going to do this thing. And so being a caring sister, but also knowing that I wasn't going to convince him just by whining about my worry. So I needed to find actual evidence. So I hit the internet. I was looking up all the research sources I could find, not just somebody's opinion, but, what's some data I can find to show either that guns aren't a safe thing to have around. There are so many accidents. So it's, this likely that the gun's just going to blow up. Or even if you're in a dangerous situation, even having a gun isn't going to help you save your life, because that's what I believed based on the very tiny amount of information that I'd found or that I'd managed to pick up from the media or from news stories. Mm-hmm. Well, I traced down every single story I could remember hearing about how the gun just blew up. Every single last one of them had a correction printed later saying, actually, it didn't just blow up. They lied about it. They pointed it, they pulled the trigger, and that's how the gun went off. So that was enlightening. And then I found other information that also changed my mind, including actually how a gun functions. It's not this magical instrument. It's mechanical. It's very mechanical.
Yeah.
No, and it's difficult. People are even talking about, it can be hard if you don't have a lot of strength. So I'm like, it's not going to just happen by itself. You have to do things to make it happen.
Yeah.
And I read data about how we're vulnerable. And the one of the statistics that hit home was that 1 out of every 5 women would be sexually assaulted in their lifetime.
Whoa.
I'm one of 5 girls. And so that 1 in 5, it hit home. If it's not me, it could be one of my sisters. Like this is a real thing that we might be in danger sometime. Mm-hmm. Even if we live in a safe neighborhood, we do safe things. It doesn't mean we're always safe.
Yeah.
And then I found out that even just the sight of a gun, like if a would-be criminal sees that you have a gun, most of the time you don't even need to fire that gun. You don't have to have these ninja Batman skills of, amazing skills, Navy SEAL skills to be able to defend yourself with a gun. Sometimes it's just the fact that you are armed that deters the criminal.
And
so my mind was completely changed.
What hit me, Rachel? We had a criminologist on ages ago. And what was interesting is I thought, women are more in danger than men or whatever. He said the biggest danger to all civilians is really the fact that you're walking around unaware of your surroundings.
Absolutely.
Phone, la. So I love that you mentioned, that my husband calls it a force multiplier. I'm not that strong physically. Men tend to be a little stronger. So what's cool about a firearm is it's like a force multiplier, because now I have force that, hey, just seeing me with a gun, as you said, can deter someone from deciding to approach me. But here's the other thing. You could be carrying a gun, but you also have to be aware of your surroundings. So, things don't happen to you.
Exactly. One of the phrases I like to use is that Samuel Colt did more for women's rights than anybody else, and Samuel Colt is, of course, one of the inventors of a modern handgun.
Yeah.
And it's because it is effective, especially for a woman who tends to have less strength, or at least be perceived as more vulnerable, or anybody though. It's not just women. It's the Ninth Circuit Court recently wrote this really cool opinion that included a lot of background stories about how minority communities, gays, other groups of people who have been ostracized in the past or maybe currently ostracized, they are so much safer, and they've been able to effectively protect themselves when they use the great equalizer, which is a gun.
Yeah. And what's interesting, Rachel, I've seen the research done in places that are gun-free zones, even other countries that say, okay, we don't have gun deaths, but hey, they have higher crime rates. They're just done by other means, like maybe knife stabbings or bomb. So the idea that the gun itself makes it more dangerous in the street or makes more crime is not true. It's not been proven to be true.
Right. And the issue of suicides does come up quite a bit when discussing gun policies. And last year in Texas, in spring 2019, there was a bill that came up regarding firearms storage. And the proponents of the bill were saying, if only we can make sure all gun owners always keep their guns locked up, we're going to reduce crime, we're going to reduce suicide. And I went and looked up data because I thought, I really want to know the data on this. I don't want to just make up a fact. I need to know the truth. Mm-hmm. And what I found is that suicide by gun can decrease when you have overall gun control laws. When guns aren't allowed to be around, people tend to not use a gun as much. But the overall suicide rate stays the same. So if you're looking to save lives, which is exactly why I do what I do, mm-hmm. Restricting gun usage actually isn't going to help. People use a gun 600 to 6,000, 8,000 times every single day to defend themselves.
Yeah.
And if we any restriction on that ability is going to hinder our ability to protect ourselves and save lives ultimately.
Yeah, it's interesting, Rachel. My friend from Japan said we have an insane amount of suicides in Japan, but it's a total gun-free country. The citizens don't have guns, but one of the number one ways she said that they're killing themselves is jumping in front of trains. So if you want to stop suicides, you got to get to the root of the problem. Why are people wanting to commit suicide, and look to solve it that way instead of taking away whatever tools people might be using to commit the suicide?
Right. It all comes to valuing life and caring about life. Not putting all your emphasis on a piece of plastic, a piece of metal, pieces of lead, but putting your emphasis on the value of life and saving and protecting and defending that life.
Yeah. And let's talk about how many times in a place where someone was armed and was able to defend people with having an arm on them, with having a rifle, a gun, or some form of firearm on them. So they think that only the bad people, or that if you have a gun, it automatically will make you bad. But the thing I've said to my husband is, think about it. If you're a criminal, are you going to go to a local gun store, fill out a form to see if you'll get a gun? You're most likely going to get it in the backhanded or in the street somewhere. You're not going to go get it the proper means.
Exactly. Criminals aren't going to put themselves out there and say, hey, I know I'm doing this illegally, but please, put me on the record as trying to do this and catch me because I know I can't get through. They're going to find other people who are willing to break the law to give them guns. They're going to steal them. They're given stories about the criminals stealing guns from the police. They're going to find some way. And if whether it's a gun or some other tool, they're going to use a car. They're going to use a van. They're going to use homemade explosives. They can use everyday materials easily as a weapon against just the everyday average citizen who just wants to come home safe at night.
Yeah. Rachel, tell me, you had this fear of firearms. Was it from stuff you heard on the news, what people told you? Where did that fear come from, and how did it manifest? How did you work through it?
Right. I think it was just that I was completely ignorant about guns. Mm-hmm. To me, they were this uncontrollable force. They could go off at any time. I didn't know how they could be controlled. And I worked through it by just reading and researching. I read through a whole entire website that was written to help instruct women about guns, written addressing women who didn't know anything about guns, but were intelligent people and could learn. And I appreciated that perspective. And so it took me a while to work through my own fear. I was still very frightened when I started carrying a gun. But just looking at the truth, looking at the facts, looking at the people who successfully used a gun to defend themselves, including people who look just like me, young women, musicians, different professions that didn't grow up with guns, and they successfully were able to use a gun to defend themselves. And that helped me realize it does have such a value in defending life, and it could save my own life and my family's life someday.
That's awesome to hear that. I mean, it's funny. I grew up in a household where my dad had like loads of guns in Virginia. And what made me scared of them is the power behind them. You could feel the power behind them, that the power is so incredibly awesome that it's scary to have that power in your hands. And I think, I don't know about you, but I think the constant training also gives you that confidence that you can control that power.
Exactly. A gun is a mechanical thing. If you don't touch it, it's going to sit there and do nothing. So it's going to do whatever you tell it to do. And, my husband and I teach his kids about firearms. They're very well versed in them, and they have been from a young age, but helping them understand the power that can go through a gun, and teaching them the responsibility about it, I think is very important. But they don't learn that just from saying, oh, guns are scary, leave them alone.
Yeah.
They learn about that by, by us exposing to them carefully at an age appropriate level. How does a gun function? How can you use it? What do we need to do to keep ourselves safe when we're using firearms? Those are all valuable lessons for kids to learn. And I wish I learned that when I was young.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what I love about the Second Amendment? And I don't think people realize that. They'll say to me, and I heard this back in college, oh, well, the Second Amendment, the founder just thought that was going to be these big guns that you had to go like this and put powder in. And they didn't imagine we'd have what we have today. And I'm like, listen, it says the right to bear arms shall not be infringed. They didn't say what type of arms. It could be a sword. But the point is that we be able to defend ourselves in any fashion and against possibly a tyrannical government, which is the biggest concern they had.
It's exactly what I was going to say. They may not have precisely imagined exactly the kind of arms that we would have, but they definitely didn't even have to imagine that we could be faced with a tyrannical government. We might have to fight tyranny. And definitely there could be bad guys around as well that we need to protect ourselves from. They had just experienced that tyrannical government and an army coming to march and take away their gunpowder, which is interesting. They weren't taking away the guns the night of the shot heard around the world. They were taking away the gunpowder, their means of using their guns. And that was a form of gun control that the colonists decided was their line in the sand, to mix metaphors and stories a little bit. It was their line, which they weren't going to let them cross. And they were going to stand up for that right so they could defend themselves and their towns and their families.
Yeah. And let's talk about the importance of being able to defend yourself as a person. I think I know myself for many years living in a city. I moved from Virginia to New York at 16. And the idea was, you don't need to defend yourself. That's why we have cops. The cops protect you. But, the cops always say, hey, we're always minutes away from, where the danger is, because we can't be at all places at all times. You can call 911. Doesn't mean we'll get there in time. We might be there just in time to pick up your dead body.
Right.
So I love the idea that we can protect ourselves. And I think it's something people should evaluate, that you don't need to look for outside help. You can train to take care of yourself.
Exactly. You are your own best chance of saving your life. And just carrying a gun, it's not a silver bullet, so to speak, that you're always gonna be safe, but it gives you a fighting chance at saving your own life. When you look at law enforcement, do they prevent some crime, just by being there? Sure, I'm sure they deter some crime. Absolutely. But they have no legal responsibility to protect each individual from a crime that's going to happen. Like there have been court cases on that. Some terrifying court cases if you're sitting there relying on cops to come and help you out, and you realize you are your own best first defender. And that's exactly it. Because law enforcement, they're first responders. They're going to respond after the incident. It's very unlikely they're going to even be right there. They're going to respond afterwards, maybe minutes, maybe even hours. Mm-hmm. But you are your own first defender. You're already right there to defend yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. And can I ask you, have you taken self-protection or self-defense of any sort on top of the guns training?
I've done various types of informal training. I have not progressed to a black belt level or different levels like that in various martial arts or other fighting techniques. I haven't chosen to invest that time. I have respect for people who do, and it's important to me to stay fit and have. I mean, there's so many ways that we choose to protect ourselves. Anything from looking both ways before you cross the street, make sure you drink enough water, get enough sleep at night. There are many ways we choose to protect ourselves, but I think carrying a gun is one of the tools that I want to be able to have to protect myself.
Yeah, and everyone should have that right if they choose it. Maybe not everyone, like you said, you weren't comfortable with it. Maybe not everyone will be. And there are other means, but I like the fact that, hey, even if you do take self-defense. I know a gal in Manhattan, my friend was taking self-defense. She said the trainer that was teaching her had 2 black belts and was knocked to the ground in the middle of the night by a gang of people and was raped and could not defend herself on the ground.
And that's part of why I haven't chosen to invest as much time in that, because I know how easy it would be no matter how much I train. If I train hours a day, I feel like I can still be overpowered too easily. Maybe I could overpower one person, but what if 3 or 4 are attacking me? I feel like a gun is a better equalizer, but it's everybody's own right to choose.
That's right. And that's the point. Choose. Yeah.
I'm so thankful that nobody pushed me into it. I mean, even my brother, he was sure of his decision, but no way did he ever tell me that I needed to, or tell me that I should, or put any pressure on me. It was up to me to make that decision. It was up to me to make the decision of what handgun I chose to purchase, of what firearms I chose to purchase. It was entirely my decision. And I appreciate that and I respect that. And I try to give the same respect to everybody else. It's your decision. It's everybody's decision personally, if you want to carry, how you want to carry, what you want to carry.
Absolutely. And I think that well, actually, the Constitution is law, and there really shouldn't be now, just talk to everyone about the license open to carry, what you're working on, because a lot of people don't understand that really, according to the Constitution, everyone should be able to go out there right now and defend yourself in any means that you feel you need to protect yourself. But there are blocks. There are gun laws. There are, if you can't just walk out of your house with a gun in most states, or, you need a license to carry. In some states, not at all, like New York, it's pretty much near impossible.
Right. So actually, in most states, you don't need a license to carry.
Whoa. Really?
Yes. So in over 30 states, they say, if you legally own this firearm and you bought it legally, you have it legally, you're legal to own it, you don't have to then apply for a permit to carry it outside of your home. You should be able to carry it. 30 of the states, over 30, I think it's 31, say, we'll let you carry openly. So the gun is visible, people can see it. Half of those states will also let you carry concealed. A little over half, about 16 will say either open or concealed. And there's an additional state that says only concealed. But all of those states, no license required. Here in Texas, we have a license required whether it's open carry or concealed carry, which, some people say, well, shouldn't that be a thing so the bad guys won't carry a gun? I say, yeah, that makes perfect sense because, we know like it's a thing. Bad guys, if they want to go shoot something up and commit crimes and murder people, they always say, I'm going to go do this evil thing. Oh, dang it. My license hasn't come. I can't go carry my gun and commit murder. No, they never say that. Who does that hurt? That hurts you and me. Yeah. And people like us, and they say, I want to carry a gun to defend myself, but I haven't been able to save up to go to a class to get my license to carry. So I'm not going to break the law and carry a gun. It hurts us to have that license requirement.
Now, why do you think Texas is the one holding out? It seems strange to me, freedom-minded Texas. What is up with that?
So we have our wonderful history and heritage at the Alamo, right?
Yeah.
It's amazing. I had some distant relatives who were there, and I'm so proud of our history and our heritage.
Yeah.
But I'm not proud of what happened several decades later. So after the Civil War, after Reconstruction, there were some former slave owners here in Texas who had enough control of our state's government that they passed a very racist law. Now, it only said they altered the Constitution just to give them authority to do this, which was extraordinary, right? So alter the Constitution, they passed a law that says you can't carry a handgun outside of your property. You can still carry a long gun. They didn't say anything about long guns. didn't seem racist, except the white people, it tended to have more long guns. And the history shows that blacks tended to have more of the handguns. And this law also was not fairly and equally applied. And you can see similar very unequal applications of the law across the southern states. It was extremely racist. I'm horrified by that. It's despicable behavior, but that's where it came from. And frankly, I think that same elitist mindset still exists today. Now, no, I'm not saying that everybody in the legislature is racist and they want it to be divided on racial lines. I don't think that's still what's going on. But I think it's an elitist mindset of, well, some people should be able to carry, but the lower classes, we're not so sure about them. So you have to jump through hoops. It's still, to me, that same type of mindset that's just, to me, that's inexcusable. We shouldn't still have Jim Crow laws, for goodness sakes, hanging around in Texas. It's time to get rid of that and say, this is not an elitist thing. Only the upper classes get to carry a gun. Everybody's got the right to defend yourself.
Absolutely. Now, what can anyone do if they feel like you did back when you started to get into this? I don't like what's going on. I want to see changes. What can be done? Can they join Gun Owners of America? Or how can they get involved?
Yes. So we count on the people of America. I count the people of Texas as Texas director. We count on the grassroots to show up and make this happen, because we think ultimately it shouldn't be just us trying to lobby. It needs to be the power of the grassroots and everyday people talking to their legislators and their legislators listening. So we try to make it easy. So the number one thing to do is go to gunowners.org and sign up for the free email alerts. You can see it there on our front page, gunowners.org. And the second level would be, make sure you also join GOA. It's $25 a year for a basic membership, or you can pick a different level if you like. But that $25 a year helps us to fight every day across the nation for your right to keep and bear arms. And so we really appreciate our membership. So you can go to gunowners.org to join.
That's awesome. I really, really appreciate the work you're doing, Rachel, and all the work at GOA that everyone's doing. I really appreciate it. And also, all the citizens out there, get out there so we can protect our right to defend ourselves. We don't need an outside entity, whether it be a government, police, God bless the police, but we have to be able to defend ourselves. So I really, really appreciate you. Thank you, Rachel, for coming to Savvy Broadcasting.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
If you like this episode, please share. To hear more Savvy episodes and Savvy Biz tips, go to lifeunscriptedradio.com. To become a guest or participate in paid sponsorship, email us at Christina@lifeunscriptedradio.com.